All right, here we're looking at our next section in 2.4, and our learning target for today is right down here is I can write and graph multi-step inequalities. We've been looking at just some inequalities using addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. Now we're going to have more than one step that we have to do. So in your notebook, we're going to be using this little foldable. So go ahead and get that out and get it cut up so you know exactly where you're at and what you're working on. So first we're going to look at what do we do when the variables are on the same side of the equation. So the example that we're going to be using is 2, and we don't have, well, let me see. We just have one variable in this case, and that's okay. So 2x minus 4 is greater than or equal to 8. So our first step is I see all of my variables are on the left side. So step 1 is if that was not the case, I would combine terms. To get everything simplified down to this case. So the second step that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to undo any addition or subtraction. Okay, so I see I have some subtraction, so to undo that I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I end up with 2x is greater than or equal to, my sign stays the same, 8 plus 4 is 12. My final step, my third step, is to undo multiplication or division. Okay, so here I see I'm multiplying, so to undo that, I go ahead and I divide both by 2. So I end up with x, my sign stays the same because this was a positive number. If I was dividing by a negative, then I switch the sign. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So now let's go ahead and graph it, because that's what we always want to kind of look at too. Okay, so there's our number line. So here I can graph it. So since I see I have that equal to sign, equal to part, I know I'm going to have a closed circle on my number, and I'm in the right order, right? So I've got my variable, my symbol, my constant. So then I can use this to help me determine that I'm going to be shading to the right, just like that. So now let's look at what if I have multiple variables and they're on different sides of the equation. That just changes things just a little bit. So here I have 6x minus 5 is less than 2x plus 11. So here you'll see I've got these variables on both sides. Okay, so step 1 is get all the variables to one side. And now that we're dealing with inequalities, before when we had just equations, it didn't really matter which side you went to. But here we try and move all of our variables to the left side, just to make it a little bit easier down the road. So I see that I don't have a symbol in front of here, so that means it's just a positive. So to undo that, I want to subtract the whole thing. Now I want to think of this 2x as an entire thing and not just a 2. Okay, so we're treating everything with a variable as an entire thing. So I subtract my 2x from both sides. So I have 4x minus 5 is less than 11. Well, now I see I have a problem similar to the one I just did. So I'm going to follow those same steps. So I undo any addition or subtraction. So I have a subtraction here I see. So I want to undo that by adding. And I add to both sides. So I end up with 4x, these two cancel, is less than 16. So now my final step is to undo any multiplication or division. So I see I'm multiplying, so to undo multiplying, I divide, and I divide both sides. X is what I'm left with. It was a positive value again, so I don't change my sign. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So again, I can go ahead and graph that. I see I do not have that equal to, so I'm going to have an open circle, and I shade it to the left. Because I'm in the right order, I have my variable, my symbol, and then my constant. Okay, so now we're going to look at two examples with what we call special solutions. Okay, so there's some things that we end up with special solutions. So one that we're going to look at, and this one's a little bit complicated, and that's okay because it'll give us great practice working through these steps. So I have 8x minus 3 is greater than 4 times 2x plus 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve this. So I see I have variables on both sides, so I have to first get them all to the same side. But I also see that I have these parentheses, so I have to deal with that first. So first I want to use the distributive property, where I take whatever's outside and I multiply it by everything inside. So I'm left with 8x minus 3 is greater than 4 times 2 is 8x, 4 times 3 is 12. So now I want to get all of my variables to one side, and I'm going to move them again to the left side. So I subtract my 8x and I subtract my 8x from both sides. Well, that goes away, so I'm now left with negative 3 is greater than 12. Is this a true statement? Since my variables went away, negative 3 is not greater than 12. So what happens if I have a not true statement? So when my statement is not true, that means I have no solution. Okay, so since this is not a true statement, because negative 3 is not greater than 12, I have no solution here. Sometimes you'll give an example of this, and you'll work through it, and you'll end up with a true statement. So if the true statement is true, if this was 13 is greater than 12, that is a true statement. So then I would have infinite solutions. Okay, so these are just some special cases and some special circumstances for when we're solving these inequalities. Okay, so now we've got this. We're going to go ahead and put this in our notes, and then we've got some other practice that I want you to work on together. I'm going to walk through one of them with you, and then you are going to be in charge of working on the rest. It's just kind of some practice and getting the hang of the steps that we take and the order that we do things in. So there we go. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to need the papers. There should be 2 pages, so you have 4 total problems that look like this. I'm going to walk through one of them with you, and I'm going to walk through this one. 5 less than 6 times a number is under the sum of 2 times a number and 11. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this started. So you are going to need some sort of marker or pen to actually go through this, and we'll figure it out together. Okay, so I've gone ahead and we've given you the steps that you're going to follow. So let's go ahead and follow them together. Okay, so I see I have my problem, and I'm going to use, I think, pink on this one. You can use whatever you want, but just make sure you can see it. So 5 less than 6 times a number is under the sum of 2 times a number and 11. So first we want to define our variable. So our variable is going to be x. So x equals a number. And I'm told that right here. Okay? That's going to be our variable. So now I have to write the equation or my inequality here. Okay, so 5 less than 6 times a number. That tells me, this less than tells me that I'm actually going to be subtracting. So 6 times a number minus 5 is under, so this is going to be my symbol, is under the sum, means I'm adding 2 times a number and 11. Okay, so here's how I can go ahead and write that inequality from just the words that I've been dealing with. Okay. So my next step is use the distributive property to get rid of parentheses. Well, I don't see any parentheses, so I know I don't actually have to do that step for this one. Step number 4 is combine the like terms on each side. Well, I don't see I have any like terms I can combine over on my left side, and everything looks pretty simplified on my right side, so I don't have to actually do that step. Okay? So the next step is eliminate the variable from one side. So I want to get my variable, everything with my variable over to one side. So I'm going to rewrite my problem, and I'm going to subtract my 2x from both sides to get it all over in one place. So now I have 4x minus 5 is less than 11. So all my variables are on one side. So now I am undoing using that addition or subtraction, right? So I'm getting rid of anything that's being added or subtracted. So I have my 4x minus 5 is less than 11. To undo that, I add 5 to both sides. So 4x is less than 16. The next step, right, is I undo using that multiplication or division. So I had 4x is less than 16. So to undo that multiplication, I use my division property, and I divide by 4. X is less than 4. So then I can take my answer and I can go in and just double check that I was right. So let's do that real quick right up here. So 6 times 4 is 24, minus 5 is 19. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 11 is 19. So we're actually good there. Okay. So I want to now go ahead and graph my equation and graph my solution on my number line. We're always going to end up graphing. Okay? So here's my number line. Go ahead and give yourself a quick little number line. So here's my 4. So since it's not an equal sign, I have an open circle, and then I shade to the left since I'm in the right order, right? So I've got variable, and then my symbol, and then my constant. So I can go ahead and shade that direction. Okay? So now you have a couple other ones that I want you to practice on. Okay? And then what we're going to do is these are going to actually be stapled into our notebook. So on the back side, or on the next page of this where we talked about our variables, we're going to, and if you need to do this on campus because you don't have a stapler at home, that's all right. We are going to just staple the very edge of these so that they all stay together, and we have our kind of practice in here as well. So I'm going to just do 2 staples right near the edge so these stay as well. So now I can flip through and see some practice and see if I skipped some steps because they weren't involved in that one at all. So that's the kind of cool thing about this one. Okay, but you're always going to be following these steps. We want to look and say, are my variables on the same side? And then I undo my addition or subtraction, and then I undo my multiplication or division. So now that we've worked through all of this, now is time for you to go in and go work on your homework and come find me whenever you get stuck.